There are a number of different charter school proposals included in this year's budget talks. Governor Cuomo, for example, wants to raise the cap on the number of charter schools in New York, which the Senate agrees with, the Assembly Democrats not so much. And then the Senate Republicans would like to increase per pupil aid even higher than the governor has proposed. The education portion of the spending plan at this point is far from finalized. With me to talk about what is ahead are Kyle Rosenkrans. He is the CEO of the Northeast Charter Schools Network. And then Dr. Tiffani Curtis is with us. She's the principal of Henry Johnson Charter School in Albany, which is actually right up the street.
Yes.
So it wasn't a taxing commute. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I were to ask you, I don't know, we have 2 weeks left, I guess, in this show,
Just
unless
short.
we go overtime, where you feel like you are at this moment, what would you say? Where are you?
Well, as the statewide membership association, the real issue that's bubbling up from our members across the state is this question of charter school buildings and how the state can better support schools that have to put a roof over their kids' heads and for years have had to take general operating dollars that we get on a per pupil basis and to use them to pay the rent or to renovate a building or to construct a building.
So you don't have capital funding is what
That's
you're saying?
correct.
Yep.
And
okay.
the Senate's one-house budget proposal would address this. It's a flaw that's been in the law really since it was passed in 1999. And so now on the table is a proposal that would fix that. So our members are really excited about that.
Which is why you had this thank you rally.
That's right.
For the Senate this past week.
That's right.
Does this apply to you? I'm familiar with your building. It's a nice building. It used to be something else, right? It had a life before you were in it?
It did, and then it was renovated, and it used to be a public school at one point, then another type of building, and now a public school again. So there were dollars used to renovate it, turn it back into a public school, and now it houses Henry Johnson Charter School.
Do you need to make additional improvements for which you don't have capital funding at this point?
Well, absolutely. We are in a growth phase. We just got a 5-year renewal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We'd love to add a science lab, a technology lab. We'd love to add a library. All of that costs money. If we wanted to do that, we'd have to use part of our per pupil funding.
Okay, so the per pupil funding under the Senate, as I mentioned, it would go even higher than the governor has proposed $75 per pupil increase. What, 125, is that what the Senate is at?
225.
225, pardon me. So it's not the per pupil increase that would actually address the capital issue, but something separate.
That's correct.
So along with the per pupil increase, the Senate also wants to give you the capital funding.
That's correct, because when you look across the state and you compare what we get on a per pupil basis, those general operating dollars, there's also a wide gap there. So the governor and the Senate are aligned that this is a problem that should be addressed this year. It's also the subject of the lawsuit from 5 Western New York charter school families that was filed earlier this year. So we think the combination of the two, we have to keep making progress in closing that per pupil funding gap, but also make sure there's funding available for the kinds of renovations and the kind of 21st century learning environments that we need to create in all schools, including charters.
My understanding also is that the creaming proposal was a problem. Is and that was in the governor's budget, correct?
That's right.
Just remind us again what it does.
What it would do is create some mandatory enrollment preferences for students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, for students that attend persistently failing schools or school districts, and also for staff of children of staff in charter schools. The tricky thing with it was that we also have schools in the state that are trying out these very innovative, socioeconomically diverse charter school models. And what a mandatory preference of that nature would do is make it really hard for them to pursue that kind of diversity within the charter sector, which is research-based and really something that the charter sector can be out in front of. But if there are too many rules in the way that enrollment lotteries are administered, it could get in the way of important innovation.
Yeah, how would that impact Henry Johnson specifically?
Henry Johnson, our demographic where we're located, we have a very high population of free and reduced. We have a high minority population, so we really serve the community in which our school is a part of. Our demographic that we're challenged with, of course, is our second language learners, our ELL students, our special ed population, children who need services that go beyond the general education classroom. It's a challenge for us to recruit and retain those families.
It seems to me that that was sort of like a bone thrown to the public school sector, specifically the teachers unions, who were sort of at war with the governor. Not like he meant to do anything nice for them, because I think he's very much, trying to be antagonistic, and that's my characterization. But their complaint all the time is that, well, the charters are doing so well, those that, particularly in the city, for example, success academies, which is always the model that they hold up, because they can get rid of people who are problems, and that you want to and keep the kids who are high performing, and therefore you're sort of rigging or stacking the deck in favor of yourself effectively. Is that, in fact, that's what this is designed to try to address, is it not?
Well, the intent was to make sure that charter schools are serving high-need students.
Right.
And when you look at it, if you look at free and reduced lunch eligibility, we've actually reached the point statewide where charters serve more free reduced lunch students than the districts in which we're located on a statewide basis. In New York City, take a look at special ed rates. We're at parity with the district on special ed. ELL, we still have room to grow. There's a huge recruitment effort on that. We're serious about serving these students. So, I bristle at the allegation a lot, and especially as more research comes out, particularly out of New York City, that shows high-need students are actually staying in charter schools. This is the Marcus Winter study. They're staying in charter schools at a higher rate than they are in the district schools. Same thing goes for special ed kids. So as more research comes out, we're seeing it's less and less of a problem than people have been told.
What are you hearing here, specifically in Albany? I mean, we're a Democrat-dominated city. Our delegation in the Assembly, Democrats, with the exception of some who are outside the city. I mean, and sort of the shorthand that we use, but it's a little bit sloppy, but the shorthand is the Assembly Democrats are generally pro-teachers union and anti-charter. Is that the reception that you feel?
So my experience is that I am very new to New York. The charter climate here for me is a new experience.
You're from California,
I am
just to be clear.
From California and immediately from Nevada. I moved here from Nevada.
Okay.
What I do know is that the work that we're doing in the charter school, I can speak specifically about Henry Johnson. Our test scores, we outperform our district schools. We have a higher population of free and reduced students. We are really aggressively pursuing the special populations like ELL and special education. So when there's this idea that we're going to exit kids out of our school because we don't want to keep the lowest performing schools students or the most challenged students, where would we send them? To a district that's doing worse than we are? Why would we, if we're in this to educate scholars, why would we send them into a district that is underperforming us? So I think the notion that we're going to keep the better students to make ourselves look better, no, we're doing the best we can. Actually, we're doing better with less money, with facilities that cost us way more, and with less dollars. And we're still outperforming the district.
Liz, I just wanted to point out that Henry Johnson specifically, they were the top school in the state that showed the largest gain in the Common Core math tests, 50-point gain last year, year over year.
For fourth grade.
For fourth grade, and that was the largest gain of any school in the entire state. So this is a school that's really shown what's possible under these new standards. Everybody's trying to figure out sort of how do we get all of our students to meet those standards. Henry Johnson's showing people, like, you can make the kind of gains we need to hit those numbers.
Do you have an opt-out movement at all? We were talking about this yesterday on the show. Jim Tedisco, assemblyman from the Schenectady area, was talking to us about all these parents opting out, mostly in public schools, from those state tests that you're referring to.
So it is a parent's right to opt out of the state test. We support the decision of a parent because this is their choice, right? We partner with them to educate their student. Do we want the results from the testing? We do. We want to be a institution that uses our test results to drive our instruction. We think there is value. We want it to be one measure of how well we're doing instructionally. So we're not scared of the test, and we partner with our parents and our scholars to not be as well. And this is just one measure of how we can judge how well we're doing as a school community.
So we're almost out of time, but Kyle, if you want to assess where we're going to be in 2 weeks, I mean, are you hopeful that the Assembly Democrats could actually come around? I mean, at this point, what my understanding is, ethics is the governor's, primary focus, though education had been for quite some time, and he's still interested, obviously, in education reform. There's two-way talks going on between the governor and the Assembly Democrats. As for the Senate Republicans, they're stuck on the ethics issue, and so I think all things sort of come from there.
Right.
Do you believe that the Assembly Democrats, there's room for compromise there on charters?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the fact charter schools are an issue for the parents and the families that live in Assembly Democrat districts, particularly in New York City. So for them to ignore the issue, I think would be untoward. And so, looking at it from the perspective of a parent or a student or a teacher in one of our schools, yes, they want their state leaders to come to live up to the highest ethical standards and come up with a deal that really restores confidence in what folks do here in Albany. But they also want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to create more great schools everywhere in the state. And so what we're asking for, and what our members are certainly asking for, is that there are a number of policy solutions on the table right now that can help us do that. One of them is this charter school buildings issue. It's the single biggest obstacle to starting a great charter school, and if we could address this policy as a policy matter this year with the proposals on the table, we can make a huge dent.
We're out of time, but if you could get nothing else and you could only get that, would you take it?
Yes.
Interesting. Well, to be continued. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I'm going to hold you to that.